Well, democracy ideally has to do with the concept of a whole group of people, the general population, being able to elect their form of government and who is going to represent them in this form of government.
Where does democracy come from? Well, in ancient Greece, in ancient Athens, democracy meant only 1/4 of people being allowed to vote, because the rest of the people were either slaves or women.
Well, it's a long story. It comes way, way back from the Greek form of government. It has been worked throughout the, let's say, the Occidental way of thinking, the Western way of thinking. It was studied during the neoclassicist period a lot by John Locke, Rousseau, all of the contractorists, during the whole study about the social contract and the different ways that the government should act to fulfill the needs of the population.
Well, democracy for me can mean very, very different things to different people. My first example would be closer to the idea of representative democracy, the idea of having elected representatives who represent the people, and then, this is a common Western conception of democracy.
La democracia verdadera es una democracia que escucha, que sobre todo le interesa dialogar y le interesa encontrar soluciones viables para todos, sabiendo que hay personas que de momento van a salir más o menos perjudicadas, pero que por lo menos todos son tomados en cuenta.
Como ciudadano, presentándome a votar cada vez que es este periodo, pero también tratando de revisar con cuidado cuáles son las propuestas, si es que hay alguna propuesta, hacer un análisis de cuál de esas propuestas me parece la más enriquecedora para lo que considero es lo mejor, tanto para mí como para el mundo social en el que estoy.
It has been evolved, yes, because you have to think, way back with the Greeks, you're talking about city-states. So you're talking about the needs of a specific group of people that had very homogeneous culture. Okay, the ideas were kind of similar. So it was easier for them to get to an agreement. Yes, you had different power groups and different perspectives, but there was still similarity that helped them to get to an agreement. Afterwards, as we keep evolving, you have a lot of different perspectives that have to be taken into account. So democracy has to change with the way society has evolved. Okay, it would be very difficult to keep it from that same standpoint that it started.
Si partimos de la idea de que lo más importante es la persona, pues los derechos humanos es algo que tendríamos que estar siempre cuidando y observando que se esté cumpliendo.
It's not just about constitutions, systems, it's about, as human beings, how we constitute or construct the democratic society in which we live. So it's down to human beings and not just systems.
Just to take an example, think about the 60s. In the 60s you had all these intellectual movements that were started by young people. Then you had the 70s when there still were some movements, there were some intellectual proposals, but they were restricted to a smaller group of people. In the 80s, it started to fade away and people weren't really interested in what was going on in politics. And we had some repercussions because of that. Then in the 90s, it was starting all over again. And people were starting to fight more for human rights, and they were more concerned about what the government were making.
Yo pienso que ya estamos en el camino, pero es insuficiente todavía. Yo creo que al menos las últimas modificaciones que hubo en el reglamento electoral, las leyes electorales, pues quedamos desprotegidos los ciudadanos. Hay un fuerte reforzamiento de las ventajas de los políticos frente a lo que finalmente tendríamos que ser la pieza clave de la democracia, que son los ciudadanos. Es decir, veo que las reglas actuales están más a favor de la clase política que de los propiamente ciudadanos.
Yes, I think it's the answer, because I think it's the if worked properly, if established properly, it's best way to ensure the application of human rights. It's the best way to take into consideration the needs of different people and take into consideration different perspectives. Okay, that since we have such a multicultural society nowadays, it wouldn't be any other form of government right now would be like imposing into specific groups, which would be directly affecting human rights and freedom of this specific groups. It is your own responsibility, and it has to do also with family values, and it also has to do with the education, let's say, given by the government. Okay, so you have a lot of different factors. Okay, and you can see that it works differently in different countries. Different countries have different levels of participation in election. Okay, and different generations also. You can say that they have different levels of participation in election process. Okay, and in making proposals about the different forms of government. Being responsible, we have to be educated in taking into consideration our interests and the interests of the people around us. Okay, and something very, very important that has not been addressed is not thinking only in the short term, and that's maybe, I think that can be one of the problems of democracy as we've seen it so far, that it thinks only on fixing the problems that are for the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, or 6 years. But we don't think in the long term. And that is something that has to be addressed at some time. Well, be aware of what is going on. They choose someone, and then they have to see if they are fulfilling what they promised or not. Then they have to see if that thing that they are doing, whether they fulfill the promise or not. That comes to a secondary part. To see if that is actually working into their best interest. Okay, and if not only complain about it, but also make specific proposals of how to better their own situation and situation of society in general.
And we need to be educated enough to say, well, wait a sec, why are we following this strategy when London, New York, and cities around the world are following the opposite strategy? Why is Mexico following the Los Angeles model when the New York and London and Amsterdam models are seen as far superior? We need to question our politicians. Why are you doing this?
Por ejemplo, que escucháramos a las minorías. No puede ser que solo nos quedemos con las mayorías. La democracia como está es la tiranía de las mayorías, y así no funciona. La democracia tiene que escuchar a todos.
Isn't just who you vote for. Politics is also you getting involved. And democracy meant you getting involved as a citizen to try and change things. Now that may be anything from protesting against the Vietnam War or nuclear weapons, or perhaps just protesting against plans to build an airport near where you live. I mean, all kinds, and then environmental protests, feminists, and many different protest groups developed. Because I mean, I personally, I like Michel Foucault, I like Friedrich Nietzsche. There's a guy in Europe that's becoming quite well known called Bent Fleurberg, a Danish guy. Who's in that kind of Nietzschean tradition as well. I mean, these are my own personal preferences. I mean, the reason being that they are famous for questioning the logics of how we do stuff. And I think that's important. For me, that's extremely important.
I think that's a mistake because that would be like taking the responsibility away from other people. Yes, we have a responsibility, but other people also have a responsibility to act. So that's one of the biases that we have that have cut off the idea of progressive education. Mhm. We have to think of, well, if you have some kind of information, yes, you have to share it. And then you're responsible and the other persons are responsible also. Okay? Instead of, I am educated or I have the information, I'm going to take the decisions for you. Okay?